This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook, and we're at the 2019 BioCeuticals Research Symposium, speaking here with Belinda Reynolds. How are you going, Belle?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good.
Belle, tell us about your new role a little bit. What's going on?
So right now I'm working in the research and development team at BioCeuticals, and so there's an involvement there in new product development, but also working on the number of different research projects that we're sponsoring at the moment.
Well, tell us a little bit about the research side of things. What's going on at the moment there?
So there's a number of different trials that are underway that we're sponsoring and supporting, so I can't say a great deal about them because they are ongoing trials. But some examples do include research that's being done to look at how nutraceutical intervention can support patients with mood disorders, but also cognitive decline. There's also some research that's been completed recently looking at the benefits of probiotics in athletes and supporting immune health. And one trial that people probably know a little bit about is the one that's going on with medicinal cannabis and looking at the benefits of it for supporting patients with glioblastoma multiforme.
Yeah, I've heard of this lady. Janet Loss.
Yes.
I'll be speaking with Janet later. Okay, I had to put it in.
Yeah, so no, it's fantastic to be working with Dr. Janet Sloth, the chief investigator on the trial, and Endeavour as well. Because I think medicinal cannabis is a huge, really interesting area, and there's so many people that can really benefit from the use of this incredible herb. So to be helping individuals who are adding to that body of evidence to support the use of medicinal cannabis.
So this is something that interests me, though. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
About you said about the body of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about like intellectual property, IP.
Mm-hmm.
Are all of these research initiatives directed at IP?
No, really the aim of the research that we're doing is really coming from a place of wanting to assist in building on that body of evidence that supports complementary medicine, because that not only supports the health of people, but also supports the profession and the industry as well.
Okay, so ingredients. What sort of ingredients are around which are of note?
So there's actually a lot of interesting research that is being done by other companies as well, looking at the benefits of different complementary medicines in different spaces. So probiotics is really one to note. I mean, we've all heard a lot about probiotics over the years, but the research on particular strains and particular combinations of probiotic strains continues to grow. So we're understanding now more and more that there's benefits in using particular strains of probiotic to harness that power of the gut-brain axis to support patients with certain mood disorders. We know that it can help with supporting a reduction in cortisol, for example, in people who are experiencing anxiety or chronic anxiety. In addition to that, we're also seeing that the probiotics have the potential to really support modulation of the immune system in patients. So in addition to that, there's also crushed nigella seed, which is a new ingredient that I find really interesting. There's some preliminary research that's supporting its use in patients with autoimmune thyroiditis. So there's research that's been done there showing that this crushed nigella seed can actually support in the improvement in levels of active thyroid hormones, but also a reduction in TSH and also thyroid antibodies.
And is there research being conducted on that ingredient?
Yes, and there's some that has been conducted already.
Has been conducted already. Okay, so that's a researched ingredient, and then you take that and apply for a sort of product application, that sort of thing.
Yes, correct.
What about the supply of raw ingredients to researchers who are doing their own research, like, for instance, Janet's research? How difficult, what sort of challenges present to you with trying to get that raw material to be able to be supplied to that researcher? Is that always just as easy? No worry, we'll pick it off the shelf.
It can depend on the ingredient. If we're talking about medicinal cannabis, there's significant challenges there.
What? Which one? What?
Considering it is a Schedule 8 drug and an unregistered medicine, it is accessible to patients in Australia through the Special Access Scheme and also through authorised prescribers. But there certainly is quite an involved process in getting the product into Australia for us to use in a trial. When it comes to a complementary medicine that is already in a product that is listed with the TGA and approved by the TGA, the process of having that type of product used for a clinical trial is a lot more simple.
What sort of challenges, though, present when practitioners read a label and they see an ingredient on there? You and I have discussed this. In fact, in detail. I'm going to pick on that one, magnesium. So even when you get something, magnesium in a certain form and magnesium in a certain form, magnesium diglycinate, magnesium diglycinate. Now they're the same, but they're not.
Not always.
Right.
So
what sort of issues present there and why?
So I think there's a number of different things there, and so that's why it's important that you're constantly looking throughout the world at all of the different companies that produce these raw materials and ensuring that the right steps are taken to evaluate an ingredient before looking at using it in a formula. And the reason for that is that not all ingredients are created equal. There can be significant variation. I mean, when we take herbs, for example, it can often be quite obvious if you have a standardization to a particular component. You can see there that that herb is often of higher quality and you're more likely to get consistency batch to batch in terms of the outcomes that you expect. But with the chelated minerals, that can be harder to determine. But what we do know is that there can be varying degrees of activation or conjugation of the mineral to the amino acids. To give an example, if you use magnesium and glycine together, it may show up as magnesium glycinate, but if that glycine hasn't fully reacted with the magnesium and been fully conjugated, you don't necessarily get the benefit of having those two ingredients combined together, because if the glycine isn't attached to the magnesium, it's not facilitating the uptake.
So your dissociation, the coefficient, the dissociation of the mineral in the gut is affected, therefore it's not going to be carried properly. So
you're
it's
more
going
likely
to
to
affect
get side effects.
Side effects. And to me, the big thing is the health of the patient. They don't get the full effect of what they think they're getting on the label. And this is something that really interests me, because I was speaking with a researcher down in Melbourne and she said something which piqued my interest and I was quite concerned about it. And she was saying the issues that she has, even with a single ingredient. And I went, it's a single ingredient, but you confirmed it when I was speaking with you later about it. In the instance of magnesium diglycinate, she was talking about another ingredient.
And so for that reason, every single raw material and every single excipient that we use in a product undergoes a certain number of tests to ensure that the quality's there, but also that you're getting an indication of efficacy as well. So a particular form of magnesium glycinate we'll only use because we do know that the right testing is performed to ensure that you have a fully reacted product, as opposed to one that only a certain percentage of that magnesium is fully reacted.
Okay, so with regards to practitioners wanting new products, we went through this with one of the more recent issues has been the addition with methylcobalamin. And there was screams for 3 years prior to that. It was really interesting how practitioners want something. So this was a practitioner-driven issue for requests for a raw ingredient. And then there was a lag time and finally it became available. But is it always good? I'm still wavering with regards to the folic acid. I still sort of sit there and go, so are new ingredients always better?
Oh, that's a tough question to answer quickly.
In 3 seconds or less.
Look, I think the benefits of having the TGA is that they do take a lot of time and effort to ensure that any new ingredient that becomes listed and able to be used in a listed medicine undergoes, they do a lot of investigation to ensure that we can confirm safety for patients. And then there's often a number of, if there is a risk of a certain ingredient at a dose higher than X amount for a certain population, there's always mandatory warnings that are enforced by the TGA that must go on a label or a website where that product is promoted. So I think in Australia, being governed by the TGA and ensuring that the right work is being done before an ingredient is approved to be included is actually a really beneficial thing.
One last quick question. You mentioned something about herbal standardization. Is there a danger there of thinking that the standardized chemical is the component which denotes quality? Or do you think we're going to get to a stage where we're going to be looking at, at least 2 or 3 to say, there you've got a reasonable propensity for activity. When people talk about actives, which I have an issue with, but you've got a reasonable propensity for activity, but also you're looking at the rich history of a good herb, of the herbal medicine in its breadth, in its complexity.
I think we do have to be careful there. I think there's a benefit in having herbs that are standardised because, as I mentioned, you then get a good indication of the consistency of the quality of the herb. And if there is evidence on the herb and you have an understanding that this particular dose that achieves this amount of an active constituent, it gives you a better indication of what sort of dose that you need to use in order to try and attempt to get the results in a study. But at the same time, like you said, we do need to be very aware of the fact that when you take a particular herb, say withania, it's not just the withanolides that are providing the benefit that herb has to offer. And so we also need to be very mindful of ensuring that we're maintaining all of the other beneficial actives that that herb contains. So that's where the HPLC can come in as well to ensure that you've got the peaks of the other actives. And in talking about medicinal cannabis, it's a really good example of that, actually.
It's actually a really good example.
People talk a lot about CBD and THC, and yes, they're certainly active components of the herb, but we're understanding more and more about what's referred to as the entourage or the synergistic effect of all of the other cannabinoids and terpenes that exist in the herb. You can have 2 products that contain the same amount of CBD and THC, but their actions could be quite different on the body depending on the terpene profile and the other cannabinoids that exist there in that plant. So that's why the research that Dr. Janet Schlosser is doing with Endeavour is so important, because we're helping to get an understanding of how these different products can be beneficial for different patients.
This herb will save the herbal industry, I think. Belinda Reynolds, thanks so much for joining us on FX Medicine today. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook.